Hey guys, tonight we're taking a gentle stroll back to a rather sticky situation in American history, one that proves even the most mundane things can turn utterly wild. Imagine, if you will, the early morning light just beginning to kiss the brick buildings of Boston's North End. You're maybe still tucked in your warm bed, dreaming of. You're on Commercial Street, a busy, bustling artery in Boston's North End, a working-class neighborhood brimming with Italian immigrants and their vibrant culture. The tank, you see, was a bit of a rush job. It had been built just 4 years earlier, and apparently, quality control wasn't exactly a top priority. Locals had reported hearing strange rumblings and groanings coming from the tank, particularly when it was full. Some even claimed to see molasses seeping from its seams, little rivulets of sticky brown liquid making their way down the sides, like the tank itself was weeping. You might think, well, that's a red flag, isn't it? And you'd be absolutely right. But in the grand scheme of booming industrial Boston, these were easily dismissed as minor imperfections, not harbingers of unimaginable doom. The steel plates, you see, were riveted together, a common construction method for the time. But the inspection process for this particular tank, many would later argue, was woefully inadequate. It was a giant, ticking, sweet-smelling bomb, and almost no one noticed the fuse was sputtering. Historians still argue whether the company deliberately cut corners or simply underestimated the immense pressure such a volume of molasses would exert. Either way, the stage was set for one of the most bizarre and tragic incidents in American urban history. A true sticky wicket, if you will. You're walking past this colossal cylinder, maybe on your way to grab some groceries, completely oblivious to the silent, immense forces at play within its unyielding walls. It's a mundane Tuesday morning, a bit nippy, and the city is just waking up, getting ready for another ordinary day, completely unaware that ordinariness was about to be obliterated by a sugary tsunami. Towering over the street, an imposing structure dominates the skyline, a massive steel tank, 50 feet high and 90 feet in diameter, holding over 2 million gallons of molasses. This wasn't just any molasses. This was industrial-grade stuff, destined to be fermented into alcohol for munitions, a crucial ingredient during World War I, though the war had just ended a couple of months prior. The Purity Distilling Company owned this behemoth, and they were in the business of making spirits, literally. You can almost smell the thick, sweet, slightly fermented scent wafting on the breeze, a constant companion to the residents living nearby. Most people just thought of it as a part of the city's industrial backdrop, a giant, ugly, but ultimately harmless, cylindrical neighbor. What could possibly go wrong with a tank full of sugar water, right? Well, certainly not of a tidal wave of sweet, brown, syrupy goo. But on January 15th, 1919, for the residents of Commercial Street, that impossible nightmare became a very, very real and unbelievably slow-moving disaster. You probably won't survive this if you're a building, let alone a human being, which is a rather unsettling thought to drift off to, isn't it? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from afar, let me know your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where these sleepy histories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture the scene. It's a chilly Wednesday, the air crisp with the promise of a typical winter day. But even before that fateful day, there were whispers, little murmurs of discontent. You're going about your day, perhaps heading to the docks where the ships are unloaded. Or maybe you're just enjoying a quiet moment before the lunchtime rush. The sounds of the city hum around you. Distant trolleys, the clatter of horse-drawn carts, the shouts of vendors. But suddenly, around 12:30 p.m., that familiar hum is shattered. The speed of the molasses, initially estimated at 35 miles per hour, is deceptively fast for something so thick. People caught in the wave weren't just knocked down. They were picked up, tumbled, and sloshing of the molasses itself, punctuated by the crunch of collapsing buildings and the cries of those trapped within its sticky embrace. It is difficult for modern scholars to pinpoint the exact sequence of events in the chaos of those first few minutes. It was so dense that some people actually drowned in it, not from being submerged, but from being unable to breathe as the molasses slowly relit them. They struggled against the suction of the goo, their boots often pulling off their feet. The task was painstakingly slow, each step a Herculean effort. Imagine trying to carry an injured person through that. It was an exercise in physical endurance and sheer will. One peculiar detail that often comes up in survivor accounts is the widespread presence of molasses-coated rats. As the wave receded, these unfortunate rodents, also caught in the sticky flood, became mired. They were, to put it mildly, not having a good day. It adds a rather grotesque, yet oddly humorous, layer to the grim scene, a small, weird vignette amidst the larger tragedy. Rescuers, who quickly arrived on the scene, local police, firefighters, and even everyday citizens faced an unprecedented challenge. But it wasn't easy. The molasses clung to everything, seeped into every crack and crevice. It was like trying to wash away superglue with a garden hose. For weeks, the streets remained sticky and stained. The harbor itself was brown with molasses for months afterwards. You couldn't walk anywhere without leaving a trail of sticky footprints. Every doorknob, every lamppost, everything within the blast radius was coated. Even months later, on hot summer days, the streets of the North End would still carry a faint, sickly sweet scent, the ghost of the Great Molasses Flood, lingering in the humid air. Historians still argue about the precise environmental impact, but it's safe to say the local ecosystem had a truly unique experience. The stickiness, the lingering smell, the sheer oddity of the disaster, it cemented the event in the city's memory, a dark, syrupy stain on its otherwise proud history. How do you rescue people from a viscous, suffocating substance that also pulls at your own boots with every step? Horses. Remember those poor creatures? Many were trapped, struggling against the sticky grip until they succumbed to exhaustion or suffocation. It was a macabre scene, made even more surreal by the distinct, sickeningly sweet aroma that hung heavy in the air. You'd think it might smell pleasant, like a bakery, but it was cloying, overwhelming, and mixed with the metallic scent of torn steel and the acrid smell of fear and debris. But what is clear is the sudden, overwhelming nature of the catastrophe. No one had any warning, no time to react. One moment you're going about your ordinary day, the next you're fighting for your life against a sugary onslaught, a truly bizarre and tragic turn of events that forever stained the memory of Boston's North End, and carried along, struggling to breathe as the thick liquid filled their mouths and noses. You're left standing amidst a landscape transformed, not by floodwaters, but by a thick, dark, syrupy expanse. Imagine walking through a world coated in sticky, treacly goo, ankle-deep in places, sometimes even knee-deep. Everything is covered, streets, buildings, trees, even the unfortunate souls, caught in its grasp. The initial wave had passed, but the molasses, now settling, became an even more insidious trap. It was heavy, far heavier than water, making it incredibly difficult to move through. People who had survived the initial impact found themselves stuck, their limbs mired in the goo, unable to pull free. It was like trying to run through quicksand made of pancake syrup, but with the added unpleasantness of debris and cold, clinging stickiness. Imagine being submerged in treacle, unable to move, unable to scream. Children playing in the street, workers on their lunch break, even a fire crew enjoying a game of cards, all suddenly engulfed in this bizarre, inescapable disaster. It wasn't just the sheer weight that was dangerous. It was the stickiness, the way it clung to everything, making escape almost impossible. One of the quirky tidbits from the disaster is that rescuers later found people with significant injuries from being battered by debris carried in the wave, like splinters of wood and chunks of brick, all coated in molasses. It turned everyday objects into sticky, lethal projectiles. You might think, oh, it's just molasses. I can outrun that. But this isn't the kind you drizzle on your pancakes. This is an industrial behemoth, cold from the January air, denser and heavier than water, carrying an incredible momentum. As it collides with buildings, the impact is devastating. One firehouse is practically flattened, its brick walls dissolving into rubble. Another building, a stable, is completely demolished, trapping the horses inside. It's a surreal, horrifying scene, like something out of a very strange, very gooey disaster movie. You're trying to comprehend what you're seeing, but your mind struggles to process the image of a building being consumed by a giant, sweet, brown blob. A deep, guttural rumble echoes through the air, unlike anything you've ever heard. It's not thunder, not an earthquake, but something far more unsettling. Imagine the sound of 1,000 freight trains derailing simultaneously, or perhaps the tearing of a colossal sheet of metal, slow and agonizing. This was the sound of the Purity Distilling Company's colossal molasses tank giving up its ghost. You look up, and what you see defies belief. The enormous steel cylinder, once a stoic part of the Boston skyline, is simply gone. In its place, a torrent, a monstrous wave of dark, viscous liquid, churns and surges. This isn't water. It's a living, breathing, sticky brown wall, reaching a staggering 25 feet high in some places. You see it roaring down Commercial Street, faster than you'd ever believe molasses could move. This isn't just a spill. It's a liquid battering ram, propelled by the sheer weight of 2 million gallons of fermented sugar. The force is unbelievable. It rips buildings from their foundations, as if they were made of tissue paper. Wooden structures splinter and crumble in an instant. Horses, still hitched to their carts, are swept away, kicking and neighing in terror. Wagons are tossed like toys. The wave barrels towards you, a sticky, inescapable doom. Survivors would later recount the bizarre duality of the experience, the crushing force and the suffocating stickiness. And the sound, oh, the sound. Beyond the initial roar of the tank's collapse, there was the peculiar gurgling. As the roaring wave of molasses subsided, a different kind of horror set in. The molasses, cold from the January air, quickly began to congeal, becoming even thicker and more unyielding. Rescuers had to wade through the molasses, often using axes to hack through submerged debris and to free those caught. The cleanup effort was nothing short of monumental. Fireboats were brought in, aiming powerful streams of seawater at the streets to try and wash the molasses away. With the immediate crisis somewhat managed, attention quickly turned to figuring out why this bizarre disaster had happened. You can imagine the murmurs, the whispers in the sticky streets. Who's to blame for all this molasses? The Purity Distilling Company, of course, was immediately under intense scrutiny. A massive class-action lawsuit was filed against them, one of the first of its kind in Massachusetts history, involving nearly 120 lawsuits and 3,000 claims. The real culprits slowly emerged: shoddy engineering and negligence. Expert witnesses detailed how the steel used was too thin, how the rivets were improperly installed, and how the entire structure was under immense strain. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from a structural engineer who demonstrated that the steel plates were simply not thick enough to withstand the pressure of 2 million gallons of molasses. There was even testimony about the lack of proper testing. The company had never really filled the tank with water for a test run before putting molasses into it, which, in hindsight, seems like a pretty basic safety check they skipped. Historians still argue about the precise level of corporate malice versus sheer incompetence. But the outcome was clear. The tank was a structural disaster waiting to happen. The trial itself became a spectacle, with detailed, often excruciatingly technical arguments about metallurgy and engineering, all centered around a giant puddle of sugar. The legal battle would drag on for years, becoming almost as legendary as the flood itself, a true slugfest in the courts. The core of the investigation revolved around the tank's construction. Was it built properly? Were the materials up to snuff? Engineers and experts from all over were called in to inspect the wreckage, picking through twisted steel plates and molasses-soaked debris. Their initial, and rather desperate, theory was that the tank had been bombed by anarchists. This was, after all, a time of political unrest, with fears of radical groups running high. The idea of a molasses bomb does sound like something out of a cartoon, but in the panic and confusion, it was a theory that gained a surprising, if brief, amount of traction. Imagine a detective trying to explain to their superior that they're investigating a sweet, sticky terrorist attack. Yes, Commissioner, the suspects left a trail of gingerbread crumbs. It's almost comical in retrospect, but at the time, it was a serious contention, if alternately dismissed. You'd find them scratching their heads, examining rivets, and muttering about tensile strength. One of the key arguments against purity distilling was that the tank had been constructed in a hurry, with little regard for safety. It was common knowledge, or at least common rumor, that the tank had been leaking from day one. Remember those seeping rivulets of molasses? Yeah, those weren't just decorative. Witnesses testified that children in the neighborhood would even collect the leaking molasses for treats, a rather charming, if unsanitary, pre-disaster activity. The defense, naturally, tried to deflect blame. As the legal proceedings continued, the legal battle eventually concluded years later with the Purity Distilling Company found liable for the disaster. The victims and their families received settlements, though for many, no amount of money could truly compensate for the lives lost, the injuries sustained, or the trauma endured. Imagine walking down the street, and suddenly, a phantom scent transports you back to that terrible day. It's like a ghostly aroma, a sensory echo of the tragedy. But the memory of the Great Molasses Wave remained etched in the minds of the North End residents. Allow the images of thick, dark molasses slowly settling to become softer, gentler. Imagine the whispers of the Boston wind, not carrying the scent of sugar, but simply the cool, clean air of a quiet night. The weight of history, sometimes sweet, sometimes strange, can be a comforting presence, can't it? Let the thought of those old, bustling streets, now quiet and still, lull you into a deeper calm. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breath, slowing, deepening, as the last vestiges of the story melt away. There's nothing left but the quiet hum of your room, and the soft blanket of sleep waiting to embrace you. It became a story passed down through generations, a unique piece of their local folklore. You can still visit the area today, and while there's no giant molasses tank, the spirit of resilience, of a community that literally dug itself out of a sticky situation, is palpable. The laughter, the cries, the strange gurgling sounds, the frantic efforts of rescuers, and the enduring sweet scent, all faded into the annals of history, a peculiar footnote in a bustling city's story. It's a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected dangers don't come from roaring fires or crashing waves, but from a seemingly innocuous, sugary substance, simply minding its own business until it wasn't. Even today, some urban legends persist about the ground in certain basements remaining perpetually sticky. While largely anecdotal, it speaks to the deep impression the event left on the collective memory of the neighborhood. It's not every day a city gets slimed by 2 million gallons of fermented syrup, so it tends to stick, both literally and figuratively. But beyond the courtrooms and the financial payouts, the Great Molasses Flood left a far more indelible mark on Boston. Before the flood, regulations for large storage tanks were practically non-existent. There was a general assumption that if you built it big and made it out of steel, it would be strong enough. The molasses flood, however, served as a grim, sticky lesson. It highlighted the critical need for proper structural analysis, material testing, and independent oversight in the construction of large industrial containers. You could say it helped usher in a new era of safety consciousness, ensuring that future massive tanks wouldn't repeat this particular sugary mistake. Historians still debate the exact degree to which the Boston Molasses Flood influenced nationwide engineering codes, but its role as a cautionary tale is undeniable. You might think, well, they cleaned it up, life went on. And yes, it did, but the lingering effects were profound and surprisingly varied. For years, perhaps even decades, after the flood, locals in the North End would swear that on hot summer days, you could still catch a faint, sweet, cloying whiff of molasses in the air. The disaster also had a significant, if less dramatic, impact on engineering and industrial safety standards. The physical landscape of Commercial Street slowly healed, buildings rebuilt, debris cleared. Now, as the echoes of this strange, sticky tale begin to fade, let your mind drift from the curious confluence of engineering flaws and industrial oversight.